Now, to justify her position, Justice Kagan came up with a rather strange straw man for her argument. Consider the story of a hypothetical congressional district in a hypothetical state, subjected to a redistricting scheme. The example is admittedly stylized, but it is in essence simulates the dispute before us and clarifies the immense issues at stake. The district, let's say, is a single county in the shape of a near-perfect circle sitting in the middle of a rectangular state. Okay, let's imagine this hypothetical district consisting of a single county. Its shape really is irrelevant. This county, like all others, is in a state that has a history. The state is one with a long history of virulent racial discrimination, and its many effects, including in residential segregation and political division, remain significant even today. A history of virulent racial discrimination. How long ago? Justice Kagan claims it remains significant today, but she's creating the hypothetical in an attempt to promote her agenda. The population of the Circle District is 90% black. The rest of the state, divided into 5 surrounding districts, is 90% white. And voting through all those districts are racially polarized. Black residents vote heavily for Democratic candidates, while white residents vote heavily for Republicans. The Circle District thus enables the state's black community to elect a representative of its choice whom no neighboring community would put in office. Again, a perfectly crafted straw man, based not in any practical reality, but meant to promote an agenda, along with what comes next. But that arrangement in this not-so-hypothetical is not to last. The state legislature decides to eliminate the Circle District, slicing it in 6 pie pieces and allocating 1 each to 6 new, still solidly white congressional districts. The state's black voters are now widely dispersed and, unlike the state's white voters, lack any ability to elect a representative of their choice. Election after election, black citizens' votes are, by every practical measure, wasted. Now, in Justice Kagan's crafted straw man, her own racial bias shows through. Blacks vote heavily Democrats, while whites vote for Republicans. This mythical state apparently has no significant Hispanic or Asian population. And while the stereotype of voting patterns may have some historic basis, they also have been changing over time. What is Kagan's conclusion from this thought exercise? That is racial vote dilution in its most classic form. A minority community that is cohesive in its geography and politics alike, and that faces continued adversity from racial division, is split, cracked is the usual term, so that it loses all its electoral influence. This straw man that Justice Kagan comes up with has one fatal flaw. While the straw man may be an excellent example of racial vote dilution, it in no way resembles what Louisiana did with their congressional map. And because that is so, Congress and the Voting Rights Act made the practice illegal. Section 2 of the Act guarantees that members of every racial group have an equal opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. The Voting Rights Act may have claimed to make Justice Kagan's straw man illegal, but she seems to forget that the Constitution of the United States supersedes federal law. The Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution states, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land." So when the 15th Amendment says citizens shall not have their right to vote denied or abridged for reason of race, wouldn't that include denying a majority of citizens their chosen representatives in favor of the minority's choice? Even after the 15th Amendment banned racial discrimination in voting, state officials routinely deprived African Americans of their voting rights. There was a seemingly boundless array of mechanisms, most of them facially race neutral, and among them the drawing of district lines. States either prevented black citizens from casting ballots or ensured that their votes would count for next to nothing. And those cases of state officials depriving people of their right to vote due to their race have been prosecuted, or at least the ones we know about. And while the Voting Rights Act has helped enforce the 15th Amendment's prohibition on denying or abridging the right to vote, does it guarantee the desired outcome? The Voting Rights Act was meant as a corrective, and when this court construed it too narrowly, insisting that a person suing under Section 2 had to prove discriminatory intent, Congress amended the law so that it turns solely on discriminatory effects. Under that revised version, a person has a good Section 2 claim if the challenged state action, in the totality of circumstances, results in an electoral system not equally open to members of his racial group, meaning the system gives those citizens less opportunity to participate in the political process and to elect representatives of their choice. Which brings to mind an interesting question. Is this obsession with gerrymandering a question of race or of political party? Because the United States doesn't have a black political party or a white political party. Yes, election outcomes have shown that majority black districts tend to vote for the Democratic Party. But then there are quite a few predominantly white districts that do so as well. So is the vote dilution racial or political? Is Justice Kagan attempting to justify the vote dilution of the Republican Party? And for 40 years now, this court has recognized that language to encompass districting decisions that, in the way illustrated above, result in vote dilution, the minimizing of minority voters' ability to elect their preferred candidates. In other words, fewer members from the House of Representatives from the Democratic Party. But no longer. Under the court's new view of Section 2, a state can, without legal consequences, systemically dilute minority citizens' voting power. Of course, the majority does not announce today holding that way. Its opinion is understated, even antiseptic. The majority claims only to be updating our Section 2 law as though through a few technical tweaks. But in fact, those updates eviscerate the law so that it will not remedy even the classic example of vote dilution given above. Except when the court looked at the outcome rather than the intent, the effect was to guarantee Democratic candidates an advantage by requiring gerrymandering based on race. Justice Kagan concluded, I dissent. The Voting Rights Act is, or more accurately was, one of the most consequentially efficacious and amply justified exercises of federal legislative power in our nation's history. It was born of the literal blood of Union soldiers and civil rights marchers. It ushered an awe-inspiring change, bringing this nation closer to fulfilling the ideals of democracy and racial equality, and has been repeatedly and overwhelmingly reauthorized by the people's representatives in Congress. Only they have the right to say it is no longer needed, not the members of this court. I dissent, then, from the latest chapter in the majority's now compelling demolition of the Voting Rights Act. The problem isn't with the Voting Rights Act, but with the Supreme Court's requirement that a certain outcome be achieved.